Hi everybody, I'm Melinda Gallant. I have a great show today for you. It's kind of a serious show, but it's a show that helps people out. So come along, let's have another Cape Conversations. Hi everybody, Melinda Gallant here, and I am so excited to have my guest with me. She is really an amazing person who does wonderful things in the community, and she happens to be a friend, I think. I hope so anyway. Karen Ellery Jones with the Samaritans. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Well, you know what? This is a whole side of you I don't know. Because I think a couple of years ago, I think I sat on the beach with you at a bonfire when they used to allow bonfires. Mm-hmm. I sat and met your husband and all of that, and I see you in various locations in the town and with organizations, but I didn't know about the Samaritans. What's your position there?
I am the assistant director of the Samaritans.
That's a big job.
Yeah.
And the Samaritans. So I was having a little debate with somebody. How did they start?
That is one of my favorite stories. We were founded in England in 1953 by Reverend Chad Vara. He was a Church of England vicar, and he officiated at the funeral of a 13-year-old girl who had killed herself. Because she thought she had a sexually transmitted disease, but in fact she had just begun menstruating. She had no one to talk to. She took her own life, and Chad stood over her grave and basically said, "Little girl, I promise you, your death will not be in vain. I will do everything I can to make sure that you have someone to talk to." People in your situation have someone to talk to. So it always was in the back of his mind, but being a minister of a pretty active church, he really didn't have a lot of time. And he kept on saying throughout his career, "God, please give me a sign. I really want to devote my life to suicide prevention." He was on holiday and he got a call from the Archbishop of London and said, "We've got a perfect parish for you. City of London Church, St. Stephen's, very few parishioners. You can do your thing." He was very excited. So it started in the basement, which was the crypt of St. Stephen's Church. And it went very well, had lots of calls into that particular crisis line. And it was founded on befriending, which simply means listening to people, right? Listening in a non-judgmental way. A few years later, Monica Dickens.
That I knew it had to do with
Monica
Charles,
Dickens,
the granddaughter, right?
Great-granddaughter.
Great-granddaughter of Charles
walked
Dickens.
in. She was a journalist. Walked in and said to Chad, "I want to do a story on the Samaritans." And he said, "Hang on. In order to do a story, I think you need to become a Samaritan." So she went through the training, did the story, fell in love with the whole idea of the Samaritans, moved over to the States, founded Boston Samaritans in 1974, and found the Cape Samaritans in 1977 in Falmouth.
Wow.
She and Chad were very much alike, very headstrong. You didn't mess with them. They got things done. But they served a higher purpose.
How wonderful. What a great story.
In fact, we celebrate our 45th anniversary this year.
I was trying to do the numbers in my head. 77 to 22.
Yes, 45th.
Wow.
I wanted to say 45th wedding anniversary. 45th anniversary we're really excited about. We have a big
So how does this is a funny story about the Samaritans, okay? A funny story, believe it or not. So when we moved here 40 years ago, we had, I have a niece who actually, because I'm from a large family of 5, I'm the youngest, and there's big age differences in that family, is only 10 years younger than me. And so she came out to visit, she was a sophomore at UC Berkeley. And she came out to spend the summer with us and actually did walking tours of Sandwich and made some money by giving walking tours of Sandwich. So anyway, that said, we were coming across the bridge and there was the sign, desperate, call Samaritans. So we get on the other side of the bridge, right? Because I picked her up from the airport, and she goes, that's really kind of amazing. Is that a dating service? Because she'd never heard of the Samaritans in California. She was a college student. She'd been in high school out there. I'm sure they have them out there. I mean, they're across the world now. But she had so she thought it was a dating service. I said to her, no, it's for suicide prevention. Which she said, well, if you don't date, sometimes you kind of feel that way.
Well, it's funny that you brought that up, because a lot of the people who call into the crisis line are lonely and isolated. And we have some callers who are looking for love. And I often think, I should start a matchmaking service.
There you go. So it was quite funny. But in all seriousness, though, how many volunteers do you have?
We have not as many volunteers as we used to because of 988. The state and federal government have supplied us with a lot of funding to hire staff to do capacity building. So we have enough people who can answer the crisis lines. We were only strictly volunteer-based up until 6 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have about 30 crisis line associates, CLAs for short, and a handful of volunteers.
Okay, so the people that are CLAs, crisis
line associate.
Are they psychologists? Are they trained? What are they?
They are everyday people just like you and me.
Okay.
What's wonderful about the Samaritans is that if you chose to volunteer or to become a paid staff member, the qualifications that we're looking for are empathy, compassion, non-judgmental behaviors. We have had people from all walks of life, from unemployed people, from doctors, lawyers, teachers, college students, cashiers, and everyone in between.
Wow.
Which makes it really nice, is that because our purpose is not to diagnose, and it's not to give advice. It's just a place for people to call in and to be heard.
And so if I were having a traumatic experience and I called in, you would just say, well, tell me your story. How do you do that?
Oh, well, we would start off with Cape Samaritans. Karen speaking. How may I help you? Everyone has their own opening. We encourage all of our staff and volunteers to be authentic on the phone. And we would say, hey, how do you, depending on how they sound, it's kind of hard to say what we would do. We would encourage them to open up, maybe ask a couple of questions, but the focus is on them.
I see.
And then we would do a risk assessment.
I see. So what happens if somebody calls and you know this is not going to be a good situation in the end? That they may be over on the brink of doing something disastrous.
Okay, well, there's a couple of steps. We still have whoever is on the line, the CLA or the volunteer, talk to them, because we know through research that people can be pulled down. They can de-escalate by just having someone to talk to. We continue to have them talk about what's going on in their life. We try to identify protective factors. It might be that they have a child or a spouse or a grandmother or a mother who they are worried that if they would do something, it would leave them alone.
I see.
Protective factors also include churches, friends, neighbors.
Do you try to guide them to call somebody else, or do you refer them somewhere else?
No, you are just full of great questions.
This is why I get paid the big bucks, Karen.
Depending on the call, for example, and our policies have changed with the implementation of 988. What we do now with people who call the crisis line and are in need of additional resources and support is that we do what's called a warm transfer. And that plugs people into the emergency services provider in the particular area that they're calling from, who will help them find support, whether that means they'll come out to their house and do an in-house evaluation, get them into therapy or other resources. Those warm transfers are something that's really new, and we're very excited about it because it sort of closes up some of the gaps in the mental health care system as we know it. Right. It's really quite revolutionary. If someone is at imminent risk, and imminent risk is simply a term that we use in the field when someone is, has a gun, has the bullets, it's right in their lap, they are ready to harm themselves, and they're going to do it within 24 hours. If we determine through the risk assessment that they are at imminent risk, we're still going to befriend them. We're still going to encourage them to talk because we know that in a lot of cases we can pull them back. We will encourage them to do safety planning with us, and again, that just kind of makes them more aware of the things in their life that might protect them, because when people are suicidal, they have something called cognitive constriction where they're just looking through a very narrow aperture, and they can't see that there are things out there that may have used in
the big picture.
They don't. That if they were in this situation maybe a year ago, what helped them then? So we try to identify all those protective factors.
Do you call the police?
That is the last thing we want to do.
I see.
Because we know that if they say to us, "Oh, you know what? I don't feel safe. I still want to kill myself, and we have done everything possible," and they say, "I want to go to the hospital," then we will certainly call rescue services for them. That can be very, very traumatic for them.
Sure.
There are stories where people are in the ER for days waiting
because hospitals
for beds.
Aren't prepared.
Exactly. Right.
Take these people in. That's during COVID. There was a crisis with kids, teenage kids.
Yeah.
Huge here on the Cape.
Exactly. I know one who was 6 days in the ER waiting for a bed.
Right.
So the idea behind these warm transfers too is to try to minimize people going into hospitals. Of course, if they have to go to be safe, then we will do it. But we're trying to figure out ways so we don't get them
But how
into
can
the
you
hospital.
trust to leave them alone, I guess is my question. If that's the right question. I'm not even trust is the right word. I mean, aren't you afraid you get off the phone and they're going to commit suicide?
There is that chance. When there's an imminent risk, the Samaritan, the CLA, or the volunteer calls the on-call supervisor.
I see.
So, for example, I'm on call this week. So if I got an imminent risk call right now, I would have to say, "See you, Melinda, I've got work to do."
And that's okay.
But I would join in on the conversation. I'd be
see.
patched in and offer support and sort of gauge.
I see.
I've had 6 years now in Samaritans and gauge, and I would only end the call when I can be reasonably sure that that person is going to be safe.
I see.
Could it happen?
So you can talk for an hour.
Oh yeah.
Hour and a half.
If someone is at imminent risk, we're not going to leave them in a state where we feel something's going to happen. We will offer callbacks to people too. So check in them on the next day if they agree to it, which is a wonderful thing to do.
Is it anonymous when a person calls?
Yes, they are anonymous. We don't know their name. We don't know anything about them. It's anonymous is insofar as within the Samaritans organization. So, for example, if someone called and they were in risk assessed at imminent risk, they did not want help, but we thought, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill themselves, or they might harm their family members.
Right. Well, that's the other thing.
I can go in the back door of our software program and pull that number.
But only a higher up could do that.
Oh, exactly. No, the staff can't do that.
Yeah.
And here's a fun fact: about over 90%, I've seen statistics from 90% to 98% of calls that come into a crisis line end there, meaning that they are helped and they feel better.
Right.
And there's no active rescue.
Right. I see. So Samaritans then feels pretty good, I would think. You would feel pretty good, the organization would, about how you are helping people.
Yeah. It's you don't realize the level of despair out there, and loneliness, and isolation.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think we all are experiencing it. I think we've experienced it for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think, this is me thinking, I know everybody, it's scary. However, that said, I think I was just talking to somebody else about this. I think there's a malaise over our country. Mm-hmm. Now, we're on the East Coast, we're Massachusetts, we know everything, we're educated, we do reasonably well. Yes, we have houses that are $625,000 median price, which, many people can't afford. We have lots of issues. However, again, it's Massachusetts, it's kind of a bubble state. We have health care, we have, things a lot of other states don't have. But I think it's here too.
Yeah.
And I think there is a sense of, with all of the information in this information age that is coming to us, it tends to be so negative. And, I'm on Facebook like everybody else I know, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. And it's not all positive stuff. It's a lot of it is negative stuff. And I think it gets to people after a while. And don't even talk about turning on the news. Although I'm a news junkie, which I am, it can be very depressing. So I think it's a national problem that stems from COVID, from coming in 2019, we were all happy, everything was good, right? And 2020, it was as if somebody shut the gate.
It's interesting that you say that, because prior to 2019, there were a lot of people who were feeling isolated, lonely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
What's interesting about this post-COVID era is that now we know how a lot of these people have felt being isolated, particularly when we were all in lockdown, exactly.
Yeah.
And we know that loneliness and isolation are fertilizers for other mental health disorders, particularly for depression. And depression is a risk factor for suicide. So we get a lot of calls from people just who are downright lonely, who have no one to talk to.
Right.
I do all the training for the crisis line, CLAs and volunteers. And a lot of the times the people who are calling have no one else to talk to.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and
we're talking Cape Cod here.
We're talking, we get calls, and this is another thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that, sure, we get calls from Cape Cod and the islands and Massachusetts, but we get calls from Washington, from Ohio, from Seattle, from all over the country. And in fact, we have had...
In this office?
Yes, we're remote based now, right? Yeah. Because we started out in Falmouth with a local number.
Right.
And then we got a 1-800 number.
Oh, that's why.
And people can Google crisis lines, and I like to say the cream rises to the top. And our number
if you're in
comes
crisis,
up.
Call Cape Cod.
That's right. And truly, I think that our staff now are so committed and so dedicated and so wonderful. I think we've got the best, but I think I may be a little biased. We are remote, yes.
So everybody works out of their home?
Yes.
Wow, that's great.
That was a huge transformation.
I would imagine. Don't they have to have special lines and stuff in their homes?
No, we have apps that they download onto their computer, and they answer through their computer. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I don't think that at this point we will ever go back to what we used to. Being remote meant that we could expand our area for volunteers and for staff, which came in handy when 988 rolled out.
Right. So explain to me, why did 988 come about?
Okay, because the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline has a 1-800 number. And if you asked me what it was, I would say 1-800-273-TALK.
Okay.
I think I have it right.
And then you have to figure out the TALK.
Exactly, yes, right. So it was very cumbersome. So a group from the FCC gathered together, I think in 2000, maybe 19, and said, we got to come up with an easy to remember 3-digit number for people who are experiencing a suicidal crisis or any other mental health crisis.
Right.
So it went through Congress, and
actually went through.
It went through, exactly, and July 16th, we rolled it out.
Wow.
So people can still call the 1-800 number. 988 is a lot easier to remember.
I see.
It took
It's
a
like
lot
9/11, it's the same thing.
Exactly, that's right. It took a lot of behind the scenes, getting all the crisis lines across the country up and ready to handle the increased volume.
Right.
Over 200 crisis lines answer the calls from
I
988.
see. So if I dial 988, I could get Cape Cod or I could get somewhere else.
Well, it depends on where your cell phone. It depends. So if your area code on your cell phone is
508.
right, then you would get one of us.
I gotcha.
If you were out, yeah. So it all depends where they're routed.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
And if a good thing about the new 988 is that it's also the Veterans Crisis Line.
Oh.
So if you were a veteran, you would have to press option 1, which would get you to the other arm of 988 for veterans.
I see. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, it must be. Was it something you were looking forward to, dreading? How's this going to work? Or did you go, oh no, okay, I get it.
All of those.
All
of those.
The above, huh?
It was. In order to be part of the NSPL, we had to do an accreditation process. And we thought that was 2 years ago. We thought we're like, oh my goodness, we got through that.
Yeah.
988 was a little more challenging because of hiring all the staff.
I see.
Through capacity building grants and things. And it's been a learning curve.
Sure.
Like every other crisis line in the country, but something so worthwhile. We're really, really excited because when you are in a crisis, 988 is a hell of a lot easier to remember than
absolutely.
the 1-800,
Sure.
NSPL line.
Right. So you're a nonprofit, correct? And how do you get your funds? Besides grants, I know you get grants.
Right, we get a lot of grants. We do get funding from the state and the federal government, and we get a lot of donations.
And you get donations.
We do, yeah. Fundraisers, we hold fundraisers.
Like every other nonprofit.
Like every other nonprofit, that's
and
right.
if I wanted to give if I had $1 million and I wanted to give it to the Cape Cod chapter of the Samaritans, how would I do that?
You can just send me the check. And then I would disappear
Karen
into the
Ellery Jones.
sunset. We have a donate button on our website.
On the website.
Yeah.
And what is the website again?
CapeSamaritans.org.
CapeSamaritans.org.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well,
I will, let me just mention,
Yes.
because a lot of people think that in order to, if you're going to call a crisis line, you have to be suicidal. That's not true.
No, you just have to need help.
You just have to need help. And also, with 988, if there's substance abuse issues as well, we are part of that now as well.
Which is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Because that, again, puts them at a higher risk for suicide.
Right. Well, it's suicide is something that it's hard for me always to wrap my head around because I'm a glass is half full kind of person, not a half empty. And yet my heart goes out to people who feel that way. And yet I have been touched by, people in my life that have been depressed and what have you. But a long time ago, when I was living in Ohio and first married, I went to a local church down the road because I thought, well, I was Methodist, but this is a Presbyterian church, and a very charismatic minister was there, and I'd met him in the grocery store of all places. And he said, "You've got to come. You live 4 miles from me. Come to Liberty Church." And I did, and I was totally swept up into the fact that it was such a caring, lovely organization, although I'm not real religious. And a gentleman that I knew, his wife and he, they had no children, had lots of issues, and he committed suicide. And I thought the saddest, I was just like, oh, how awful. And my first response to this minister who told me about it, because he knew that I knew them, and there was going to be some help for the wife, was, and this is 50 years ago probably, was, gosh, he couldn't face his problems, he was a coward. And he looked at me and he said, no. He said he was brave because he had to leave everybody he loved to take himself out of their lives so he wouldn't hurt them anymore. And of course I went, whoa, I never thought of it that way. But that's true though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, what we like to say, Melinda, is that when people die by suicide, they are in so much pain that they want the pain to stop. They're usually ambivalent about death, but the pain is so great that they can't escape it. They just can't take it any longer. In order to die by suicide, you have to override our instinct to live and to survive. And those are pretty ingrained in our DNA. So you can imagine the pain is that great that it could suppress everything. It takes a number of things all coming together for someone to take their life. We're hoping that, people who are in that state will call us so we can help them work through some of their issues, that they have a caring person on the other line. It's a very complex issue, suicide.
Well, anything that has to do with human beings is complex.
It is, and not,
and you have to find somewhere in all of this, there's a crazy sense of, if you're helping somebody, there's this crazy sense of satisfaction for helping those people, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. People always say, oh, you've been working for the Samaritans for 6 years. Isn't it depressing? Yeah, and I said, absolutely not, because we're doing good in the world, and I happen to work with the best people. We have a lot of fun. We work hard, but we also have a great time together. Stephanie Kelly is the executive director, and when I entered the field, I had no experience in social services. I was a writer.
I know, that's what I
and she was a wonderful mentor to me, and still is, and it's a wonderful organization, and at the end of the day, we try to do our best.
Well, and I suppose that's all anybody can do, right?
Exactly.
I mean, the bottom line is that's true. So again, if I'm feeling sad, very sad, not your regular sadness, but very sad, overwhelming sad, and I'm feeling lonely, and I don't know which way to turn, kind of thing in my life, then I would dial 988.
Yes.
And if I'm a vet, I'd hit the prompt.
Right, you'll have the prompt. Exactly. Though a lot of vets will just talk to us. Instead. But
and that's a huge issue too, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And what's so weird to me is all those guys came back from World War II, and they had the same problems as everybody else, but nobody talked about it.
Right.
My mother was from the Southwest, and we had a crazy aunt. And she was crazy. She'd paint her face like a clown, which is a little crazy. And she thought she was an opera singer. But
unless she was going into the circus.
She wasn't going to the circus. No, she had family. And yet, we never talked about it.
Right.
And if you ask about it, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Well,
I think now that has changed. And I remember when I first started in this field, it was hard for me to say the word suicide, or, it's like, oh, suicide, I don't want to really say it because it's scary. But the more we talk about mental health, the less stigma there is. The walls sort of come down, and people are able to talk to people. I think with the younger generation is that they're more likely to seek help than maybe our generation. You know, therapy is not a scary thing. Going on antidepressants it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that you're getting help.
Right.
So that's a good thing. I will say that suicides from age 10 to 24 have been creeping up.
I know that.
Which for us is, you know, very, very troubling.
Right. And was it because of COVID, or did it start before that?
Our last statistics are from 2020. So we don't know, you know, there's always a couple year lag between statistics. In 2020, there were 45,000 suicides, down from the prior year.
Wow.
People ask me all the time, do you think we'll see an uptick? I suspect we will, because of COVID, because of the isolation and depression.
Yeah. Well, and especially with kids. I mean, let's face it, they had a year, the kids who were in class in 2019 in September, who didn't get to go to graduation. They didn't have one, right? Everything was closed down. Those kids, their teams were disbanded. They couldn't do that. There were so many things. Everything was you can't do, and we're going to isolate you and put you in your home at a computer, at a screen, which you're telling your kids, get off that screen, and they're on their screens all the time.
They miss their proms.
They missed their proms. They missed everything. And although as a kid I can't imagine myself being that distraught by it, but there are other factors too. You know, there's the social factor of it all and whatever.
I think a lot to do was the socialization and missing these events, graduation, prom.
Rite of passage.
It is a rite of passage, and it's a loss.
Yeah,
and their loss, that particularly missing the prom or graduation, for most of those kids is the greatest loss that they've ever experienced.
Right.
So they are grieving for all those times that they missed.
Well, it is kind of a conundrum. I mean, you just don't know. In this day and age, you know, we know that this is not the last pandemic we're going to see. I mean, they've already said that, you know, and I wonder how we'll handle learning. You hope you learn from what you've just gone through. I wonder if we'll learn from that, though, on how to approach all these things, especially with kids. I mean, I have grandsons and granddaughters, so I worry about them. Although they're growing up so quickly, they'll be adults by then. But you wonder how, you know, if we've learned anything from all this.
I hope that we have at least learned enough to prevent some of the isolation and loneliness factors.
Sure.
We'll have to see.
Well, it certainly is wonderful that you have people that can work out of their home and do this, which is that isolating for them? I should ask that question. Yes, no? I mean, I love to have my fuzzy slippers on.
It all depends on the person.
Yeah.
We have such a great group. And we have they can talk with one another through software, and we have round tables that we get together virtually and chat, and we try to provide an environment where they feel as though they're being nurtured.
Sure. How many hours of training do they have to have?
We have 15 hours of online training, and they get to spend it with me. And then there's right, and then it comes out to about 32 hours of training. It is, and they're constantly learning.
Sure.
As they go.
Do they get nervous when they do the first one?
Oh yes, I remember when I did my first call. This was when we were in Falmouth. Because all staff go through training and we have to answer calls too. I don't anymore. And I was staring at the phone and I was like, oh Lord, please don't ring. I was willing every bit of my energy into, or, you know, have electricity, you know, burnout or whatever. I picked it up and it was scary, but I realized that as long as you are authentic and you're caring
Yeah.
and you're there for them. You picked up the phone when perhaps no one else would have picked up the phone.
Right, right. And isn't it amazing they can talk to a person who is not related to them,
Yeah.
not a friend, but they feel more comfortable
Yes.
really bearing their souls
Exactly.
with a stranger in anonymity.
Right, because that stranger is not going to tell them, oh, you should do this, you should do that,
Right.
or judge them.
Right,
They're
right.
just going to be listening and say, yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So they're not doing the shoulda, woulda, coulda.
No, because that doesn't help.
No, of course not.
We have found that most of our callers have been told you should have done this, and this.
Yeah.
And if they could have, they would have, but they
Right.
can't.
They can't because they can't get out of their own way.
Exactly, that's
Yeah.
right.
Anyway. Well, you have been incredibly informative today.
Well, I'm so happy you got to learn more about the Samaritans.
I
I'm always so
am.
excited to talk about the
if you're in
Samaritans.
crisis,
988.
988. Simple, easy.
Easy, fast.
And you will get a wonderful person
Mm-hmm.
on the other end of the phone who's going to help you,
Right.
talk with you, and listen to your issues.
Right,
which
and
is
then
wonderful.
plug you in
Yeah.
to whatever resources that you may need. And
Oh,
that
that's
again
terrific.
is all because of the warm transfer 988 that we're so excited about.
Yeah.
Fewer people are going to fall through
The cracks.
the cracks. Yeah.
That's amazing. Totally amazing. Well, all I know is I know something new about Karen Ellery Jones, Assistant Director of the Samaritans. So it's so nice to have you with me today.
Oh, and thank you for having me. I enjoyed this so much.
Okay, great. Thanks. Wow. Karen Ellery Jones. Wow, Assistant Director to the Samaritans. She's a wealth of knowledge, that's for sure. But she also explained how they can help you if you're sad, you're depressed, you have anxiety. They're going to guide you to the direction you need to go. So remember the number 988. Very important, very, very important. If you're upset, you have some issues, you can't deal with it, man, we've all been there. Call 988. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time on another Cape Conversations.